Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm going to do something a little different today. I've gotten a few requests to do some propagations, show how to propagate pothos, and since I'm going to do pothos, I'm also going to do some philodendrons and monsteras just because they're very similar and very easy. Springtime is definitely the best time to propagate your plants because the environment is just optimal for them to root and grow. So first we're going to get started by taking scissors, and I've already washed them with hot water and soap. This just prevents any bacteria from spreading from plant to plant. I know that these plants are pest free and bacteria free, so I'm not really going to bother washing them in between plants. Okay, so first I'm going to get started with a pothos. I'll swap these guys. Pothos are definitely the easiest because they are super fast growers and their roots grow really quickly and they're very defined on where you can cut them. So I'm going to come up a little closer. You can see right here on this vine of pothos, it has a bunch of little nubs. Those are aerial roots, and the aerial roots are basically where the normal roots will grow from. And this plant is very leggy, and it only has like two stems in it, so I'm going to add some more to it. I'm going to leave this one alone just because it's growing nicely. This one's getting pretty big, so there's two ways that you can do this. If you just want to make a pot fuller, you can actually just wrap the plant around in the soil and then stake the roots in there, and then the roots will develop and the plant will just get fuller and more leaves will grow from the sides too. Or we can do a water propagation, which is what I'm going to be doing today. So basically so the main thing that you need to keep in mind when you're propagating and cutting a pothos, you need to make sure that you have at least one aerial root. So I'm actually going to leave, let's see, how does this hang? I'm going to just propagate these 4 leaves up here. So I have 4 aerial roots, and I'm just going to cut right in between. Boom. Okay. So now this guy can continue trailing, and actually when you cut a vine, more leaves will, or more stems will branch out from it, and it'll become a fuller plant. So I'm going to save this for now and go on to the next one. I'm only going to do one small one, and I think I'm actually going to do this one as a soil propagation, and then I'll do this one as a water propagation, but I'll show you both. So next, this guy. This guy has been just recently starting to grow. He actually looks super cool because he's super compact and I just really like him. But there's half of the pot that's still a little bit empty, so I'm going to try cutting a few pieces that I can water propagate and then eventually pop back in there. Let's start with this stem since it is the longest one, and I've actually already cut some of the stem here. This is where I cut and propagated this plant from last time, and you can see a new stem has grown out from it, and all these little roots are actually the aerial roots, and from those, that's where you can propagate a new plant from. So to propagate this guy, I'm actually going to probably cut from around where it was cut last time, because that's where the biggest stem is, and that's where I can get my scissors in. And boom, you have a bunch of little leaves and all those aerial roots, and that's what I'm going to plop in the water later. So the next type of plant that I'm going to do is a philodendron. Philodendrons are very similar to pothos in the sense that they also vine, and then they have these little aerial roots. The aerial roots are much smaller, and sometimes you can't really tell. Sometimes they're longer sometimes, but much thinner. For example, that right there, that's an aerial root that's kind of dried up. But they're longer and a lot thinner. So we're going to do the same thing with this guy. I'm actually going to, instead of propagating him, he has a few stems that have reverted back either to the all green form or the like all neon green form, and I really don't like them that much. So I'm going to cut those off. Those are very small like stems anyways, but I'll show you how you could propagate them. You want to, once again, cut right below a node, and the node is where the little aerial root is popping out from. And then it's kind of where like there's a V basically, like where the leaf comes off. That's usually where you'll find an aerial node for pothos and philodendron. Okay, so now that we've taken some cuttings, I'm going to show you how to actually get them to root. One way is to just simply put it in soil. Well, I would actually recommend waiting a little bit just because you want the cuts to callus over, just so you don't get any bacteria in them. It could like cause root rot or like just make the plant rot. So I would just wait for about an hour. I'm just going to show you in theory what you would have to do. So you can just take it and put it right in the soil and then cover it up ever so slightly, so the roots are like pushed in there, but it's not like the plant isn't fully covered. And this will just help those three nodes to root and then grow. The second way to do it is to propagate them in water. So you would just fill up a cup of water or a jar like I have here. I'm gonna have to get another one since they don't fit in here, but fill that up with water and just make sure that the nodes where the roots would come from are submerged in water, and eventually roots will form. The third method, which I don't really like but a lot of other people like to do it this way, is to use sphagnum moss and get it wet, and then you can put it either in a box and let it propagate, or you can just let it sit out. I think sphagnum dries out really quick unless you're doing it in a box. I don't really like the way it looks in a box just because you can't really see it, and I don't know, just having boxes is not really my thing. So I recommend water. I think most pothos, most philodendron will root if you put them in water. Next, I'm going to be talking about a few other plants that are very similar to propagate. One being the Rhapidophora, Monstera, and then Syngonium. So these guys are all vining plants, which means that they have aerial roots, and then and you can actually just cut them. I'll start with this guy. So this one was actually a small cutting, a 2-leaf cutting that I got, and he's still growing, so I'm not going to propagate him right now, but I will show you in theory where you would cut him. So this right there is an aerial root, and if you chop right underneath there and put that in water, the aerial root will grow, and eventually you can have 2 Rhapidophora tetraspermas. I'm going to let this guy grow, and maybe eventually I will propagate him just to get a fuller plant, but for now I think I'm going to leave him the way he is. My second plant, which I'm not going to do once again today just because I don't really think that this guy is big enough yet to propagate, but if you had a arrowhead plant and it was vining, you could do the same, just find node and then propagate or cut it right below it. Some of them are actually starting to grow. I'll put them right here. So that right there would be an aerial root. And you can cut right below it and then propagate him and have another plant, but I like the way he looks right now, so I'm going to keep him this way. My third plant is the Monstera. So I have 2 here, 3 actually. I don't know if you can see this guy. I have a normal Monstera that actually started off as a propagation. I cut him, and I lost a lot of Monsteras before I figured out how to actually propagate them back in the days. You have to cut, once again, underneath a node. If you don't have an aerial root, then you won't get roots, and then eventually the plant kind of just dies. So this one has a really good example. This is a really nice aerial root. It's actually dug into the soil, so I'm not going to cut it, I'm not going to disturb it. But in theory, you would want to chop like right there, so you have an aerial root and then you have like a leaf. These guys are slower growers, so I'm not going to cut him up. He's doing just fine the way he is. But if you have a Monstera adansonii, this is very similar to philodendron and pothos. I actually think their aerial roots look more like pothos than philodendron, just because they're so big and just like very thick. I will take a few cuttings. This guy keeps getting bigger and bigger, and funky, and I think I might just take a few cuttings, because why not? He's getting so big. These guys grow so much. You have to find where you have some aerial roots, which there's one right here, and then there isn't another leaf till here, so I'm just going to cut right above that. There's actually quite a few aerial nodes that are popping out from above the leaf, so I will cut like that. And once again, I'm going to let this guy callus over before I put him in water, but right there and right there you're going to have roots grow. And eventually I can pot that guy back up or trade him, or we'll see. Okay, thank you so much for watching. Yeah, just a few things to keep in mind when you are propagating is this only really applies to vining plants such as pothos, philodendrons, rhapidophora, tetraspermas, some monsteras. If it doesn't have an aerial node, don't cut because the leaf will just eventually die. Make sure you have an aerial node. Let them sit out for like an hour or so, I would say, so they can callus over and you don't have a big bacterial infection. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.